Paul Barry is a respected journalist who has worked for print, radio, TV and online media outlets. He invited us into his office to talk about how ethics in journalism has changed over time and his perspectives on different ways of communication.
Things happen a lot quicker in commercial television. People don't argue so much about whether they should do it or not. They tend just to do it. And I think there's an overwhelming sense of the market being out there and viewers, the number of viewers being what matters. You know, if you don't have people watching the program, then you're dead. Whereas you can survive at the ABC without people watching, because there's some feeling that what you're doing, you know, the quality or the content of what you're doing is what's important, rather than whether you've got a mass audience watching it. I think social media is part of a trend where people tend to put things up on the basis that someone has said it, and they don't bother to check whether it's true. So instead of going through the whole audit process and due diligence to actually understand if a story is right or not, what they do is say, well, this is being said, and they wait for it to be knocked down. And that's now regarded as almost a legitimate process, where it doesn't matter if there's no backing for the rumour. A rumour is as good as a fact on social media, it seems to me, because it can be corrected very quickly or shown to be wrong very quickly. That's a completely different attitude. And I think it's bad when that gets into mainstream media, as it has done, where you find mainstream media picking up on rumours and treating them essentially as a fact. And so you get stories out there which are just nonsense. And I think it devalues the whole currency of news, essentially, when what you read in the papers and what you read on social media and what you read on websites now is much less able to be trusted than it was. I think the ABC probably does have a particular sort of person in it, and you know, they're not the same sort of people who work on 2GB or listen to 2GB. So from that point of view, maybe sometimes it does have, you know, a one-sided look at life. But I think also it has very strict rules about being objective, and it has a very strict and cumbersome complaints process, or cumbersome for a journalist if you work here. And I think it does extremely well in keeping steering a straight line and keeping balance. I think in some organisations it's clear that you don't get on unless you do what your editor or your section editor wants you to do, and you take a particular line on the story. That's certainly not something that happens at the ABC. You know, the opposite is true at the ABC, in the sense that it's much more disparate, the power. It's not hierarchical. You don't have an editor-in-chief saying, you will do this, you will take this line. But in some newspapers in particular, you certainly do. One was the smoking front page in the Telegraph about how plain packaging had increased sales of cigarettes, which was complete nonsense and just had no evidential basis for it at all, as far as I could see, and all the evidence pointed in the opposite direction. I thought that was a great story of Media Watch to pick that up, and a shocking piece of work on the part of the Australian. There was no 24-hour news cycle, none of that sort of build-up of pressure throughout the day, none of that great need to be instant and to react immediately. None of that great sort of churn of opinion when something gets put up there and then 15 people immediately bash one side or the other. So it was a totally different time. And newspapers were secure. They had this fantastic revenue from classified ads. There was vast amounts of money to send people all over the place, and very little competition from people who didn't get paid very much, which is, you know, what happens nowadays. So it was a great time to be a journalist. In many ways, it's the same thing. It's about communication, trying to make stuff direct, simple, easy to understand, give it a cutting edge. The internet is much more immediate, so writing for the Power Index or Crikey, which I did, you will have a commission. Well, you'll decide by 8:30 what you want to write, 8:30 in the morning. By 10 o'clock you'll have it written. So you have a very short period of time, and you can really only take one angle. You have to learn how to deliver that quickly and not get lost by chasing too many other things. Four Corners, you have 8 weeks, so you have a totally different approach, and you can then get buried in research, but still you've got, at the end of it, to cut through that and tell a story. So it's all about telling stories, figuring out what the story is, and trying to talk to your viewer, talk to the person who's reading it, make them understand what you're trying to say, and obviously to have something to say.